The day started like any other, but deep down, I should have known better. My life had been feeling off-kilter for weeks, as if reality was a puzzle missing a piece, but I hadn't wanted to confront it. The unease simmered below the surface, ignored but never quite gone. That night, I walked into our home, my bones aching from the 12-hour shift at the factory. Working with heavy machinery kept my mind occupied and away from these gnawing suspicions that haunted me in the quieter moments. The house was unusually quiet. Normally, the sound of my kids' laughter would flood the hallway, the kind of noise that makes a tired man feel alive again. Tonight, there was nothing but silence. A void. I set down my lunch pail and wondered if I had misremembered something. Had my wife, Lisa, taken the kids somewhere? Yet her car sat parked in the driveway. A chill ran down my spine, and suddenly, I noticed Lisa sitting at the dining room table, the only light coming from the small lamp overhead. She wasn't browsing her phone or reading like she usually did. Her hands were clasped together, trembling slightly, her knuckles white. I couldn't ignore the redness around her eyes. "Lisa," I said, my voice almost a whisper. "What's going on?" She looked up at me with an expression that turned my stomach to ice. It was a mix of fear, guilt, and the kind of sadness you know is about to punch you in the gut. I pulled out a chair across from her, the legs scraping loudly against the wooden floor. My body was bracing for impact, but I had no idea just how bad it was going to get. "We need to talk," she said, her voice cracking like a fragile branch under pressure. The words alone were enough to make my heart skip, but the way she couldn't quite meet my eyes sent a storm of emotions roaring through me. The last time she looked at me like this, she was telling me her father had died. "What is it?" I demanded, already losing the battle against my own panic. She bit her lip, tears threatening to spill over. "I need you to believe me when I say this. I never meant to hurt you. You are everything to me." Her hands clenched tighter, and the weight of whatever she was about to confess pulled the air from the room. I couldn't even respond. My mouth went dry, and all I could do was stare, helpless. "I've been seeing someone else," she admitted. "For a year now." The words hit me like a sledgehammer, leaving me breathless, stunned, and broken all at once. The world around me splintered. My heart raced, my jaw tightened, and the tidal wave of disbelief crashed hard. A year. An entire year. How had I been so blind? Lisa's eyes searched mine, pleading for something I couldn't give her. Understanding, forgiveness, maybe even love. Instead, I sat there, frozen in time, fighting against the unthinkable. "Why?" I finally managed to choke out, but it sounded so small, so fragile. My anger hadn't even had time to catch up yet. "How could you?" Tears spilled down her face, but I found no comfort in them. The woman I had trusted, the mother of my children, had been living a lie. She reached out, but I jerked away, my hands balled into fists under the table. Lisa's outstretched hand fell back onto the table, her fingers curling inward as if trying to hide the betrayal that had spilled from her lips. The sight of her sorrow only ignited the firestorm brewing inside me, but I kept my face stone cold, refusing to let my emotions show just yet. My heart was shattering, each fragment piercing deeper with the weight of her words. "Why?" I repeated, my voice a strangled whisper. I needed an explanation, something to make sense of this nightmare. Her betrayal felt like a poison spreading through my veins, and I was desperate to understand what had led us here. Lisa's lips quivered, and she lowered her gaze, unable to face the devastation she'd caused. It just happened," she stammered, as if that would somehow soften the blow. "We were spending time together at work, and I slammed my fist against the table, making her flinch. "Don't you dare try to justify this," I spat out, barely controlling the tremor in my voice. "A year, Lisa. You lied to me, to our kids, for an entire year." Guilt and fear warred on her face. "I know," she said softly, and the weight of her words only made my anger boil harder. "I never wanted it to get this far, but what?" I cut her off. Was he worth throwing away our family? Was he worth every goddamn moment we built together? My voice grew louder, raw and unhinged. I couldn't help it. The pain was shredding every fiber of my being. Tears cascaded down her cheeks. "I still love you," she insisted, her voice cracking under the pressure. "Please, you have to know that." "Love?" I echoed bitterly, the word tasting like ash. My chest heaved as I struggled to hold back the flood of emotions threatening to drown me. Love had no place here anymore. It had been twisted and corrupted, tarnished by her betrayal. I rose from my seat, unable to stay still, the urge to escape overwhelming. My hands clenched and unclenched at my sides as I paced the length of the room, trying to find an anchor. The walls seemed to close in, suffocating me with memories that had all turned sour in an instant. "How long have I been a fool?" I demanded, stopping to face her again. "How many times did you look me in the eyes and lie, Lisa? How many damn nights did you come home and pretend everything was fine?" Her sobs broke through the air, but I felt no sympathy. "Every day I hated myself for it," she choked out. "I wanted to stop to tell you, but I was too scared." "Too scared of what?" I roared, my voice echoing through the empty house. The silence afterward was suffocating. "Of losing me? Of facing the consequences of your actions?" She didn't respond. The truth was too ugly to put into words, and I could see the guilt consuming her. My hands trembled with rage, and I knew if I stayed any longer, I'd lose whatever fragile grip I had on my composure. "Get out," I ordered, my voice dangerously calm. Her eyes widened. What? "Get out," I repeated, enunciating each word. "I can't look at you right now. I can't breathe in the same space as you without wanting to scream." My voice cracked, betraying the pain I was trying to hold back. "So, just go." Lisa hesitated, her sorrow deepening. But after a long moment, she stood up, her shoulders slumped in defeat. She looked at me one last time, as if hoping to see some glimmer of forgiveness, but there was none. Not yet. Not today. She grabbed her keys, the sound of them jingling in her shaking hand echoing in the heavy silence. The door closed behind her, and I was left alone in the house that no longer felt like home. The door slammed shut, and the silence that followed was deafening. I stood there, rooted in place, trying to process the bombshell Lisa had just dropped on me. The love of my life, the mother of my children, had been betraying me for a year. A whole year. How had I missed the signs? Had I been that blind, that trusting, that naive? My heart raced, pounding so violently in my chest that I felt it might break free from my ribs. I gripped the back of a chair, my knuckles white, just to steady myself. Images of Lisa flooded my mind. Our wedding day, the first time we brought our daughter home, the countless nights we lay side by side, whispering dreams of the future. Those memories felt tainted now, like beautiful lies wrapped in thorns. Anger flared again, hot and uncontainable. I wanted to throw something, break something, anything to match the chaos raging inside me. But I held back, clenching my teeth. Our kids would be home soon, and I had to pull myself together. I had to be the strong one now, even if the foundation beneath me was crumbling. I walked to the living room window, looking out at the street, trying to catch my breath. A neighbor was walking their dog, oblivious to the storm brewing inside my house. It was surreal, almost laughable, how the world kept turning even when mine had come to a screeching halt. With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone. I scrolled through the contact list, my thumb hovering over names. Who could I talk to about this? My parents? No, they would only worry and maybe even meddle. My friends? The idea of sharing this shame, this humiliation, with anyone felt like pouring salt into an open wound. But then a name caught my eye, Sam. My oldest friend, the guy who had been there for me through every rough patch since high school. If anyone would understand the gravity of this, it was him. My thumb hesitated before I tapped the name, and I brought the phone to my ear, feeling a surge of nervous energy. "Hey, man," Sam answered after a couple of rings, his voice cheerful and completely unaware of the chaos waiting on the other end. "What's up?" I swallowed hard, the words catching in my throat. "Sam, I need to talk," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's bad. Real bad." Immediately, Sam's tone shifted, the concern palpable. What happened? Are you okay? I rubbed my forehead, trying to push back the tears that threatened to spill over. Lisa, she's been having an affair, I said, each word feeling like a knife twisting in my gut. For a year, Sam. An entire year. There was a stunned silence on the other end, and then a sharp exhale. Oh, man, he said softly, the sympathy in his voice both comforting and excruciating. I don't even know what to say. Are you sure? She just admitted it, I replied, my voice cracking. Right here, in our home. She's gone now. I told her to leave. Another pause. I'm coming over, Sam said firmly. You shouldn't be alone. Thanks, I muttered, grateful but still feeling a hollow pit in my chest. I ended the call and dropped onto the couch, my head in my hands. The clock ticked loudly from the wall, a harsh reminder of how time kept moving even when I felt frozen in pain. The weight of betrayal pressed down on me, but the worst part was the confusion. How could someone I trusted so deeply, someone I loved so fiercely, betray me in such a way? It wasn't just anger I felt. There was love too, twisted and suffocating, refusing to let me let her go easily. I hated her, and I still loved her. Both emotions at war, tearing me apart from the inside. I sat there in that living room, waiting for Sam, the shadows growing longer around me. Every second felt like an eternity. I barely moved from the couch, lost in the swirling vortex of emotions that kept dragging me down, deeper and deeper. My body felt heavy, as if the gravity of my pain had doubled, keeping me tethered to this awful moment in time. The sound of the doorbell jolted me out of my daze, and I forced myself to get up, my legs shaky, the world spinning for a second before stabilizing. When I opened the door, Sam was standing there, his eyes wide with concern. He was still in his work clothes, a dusty blue uniform from the auto shop, and the oil stains on his hands showed he had rushed straight over. Seeing his familiar face, his concern so genuine, almost broke me right then and there. Without a word, he stepped forward and pulled me into a hug, one of those tight, manly embraces that only come out when words aren't enough. I clung to him, my pride be damned, because at that moment, I needed something to hold on to before I completely fell apart. We pulled back, and Sam's eyes scanned my face. Damn, he whispered. You look like hell. I gave a hollow laugh, more of a choked sob. Yeah, well, it's been a hellish day. He followed me inside, and we both sank onto the couch. The silence felt heavy, but I couldn't bring myself to speak. My mind kept replaying Lisa's confession, the pain in her voice, and the cold, undeniable truth that she'd been with someone else for a year. Sam waited, patient as always, but his concern only grew. Tell me everything, he finally said, leaning forward. What exactly happened? I took a shaky breath, running my hands through my hair. I came home from work, and she was sitting there at the table. I began, my voice strained. She looked broken, but I had no idea. Then she just told me. 1 year, Sam. She's been having an affair for a whole goddamn year. His face hardened, his jaw tightening. What the hell, man? He muttered, shaking his head. I can't believe it. Lisa? She always seemed so devoted. I let out a bitter laugh, though it felt more like a strangled sob. Yeah, me too. I mean, we had our ups and downs like any couple, but I never imagined. Sam's hand clenched into a fist. Who's the guy? I don't know, I said, my voice cracking. She didn't tell me, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to know. It doesn't matter. What matters is that she betrayed me, and I feel like an idiot for not seeing it sooner. He let out a slow, angry breath, his knuckles white from clenching his fists. Man, I'm so sorry. I don't even know what to say. I glanced at him, my own anger simmering beneath the surface. I don't know how to feel, I admitted. 1 minute, I want to punch a hole in the wall. The next, I feel like crawling into bed and never getting up again. How could she do this to me? To our kids? Sam's expression softened, and he placed a hand on my shoulder. You don't have to figure it all out right now, he said gently. You're allowed to feel whatever you need to feel. And you're not alone, all right? Whatever you need, I'm here. His words were a balm on my raw, exposed emotions, and for the first time since Lisa's confession, I felt like I could breathe. But it was still shallow, still painful. I have to be strong, I whispered, more to myself than to him. For the kids. They don't know yet. I can't let this destroy them too. Sam nodded, understanding the weight I was carrying. We'll figure this out, he promised. One step at a time. As I sat there with my best friend, the pain was still suffocating, but it felt a little more bearable with someone by my side. Someone who understood the chaos, who wasn't afraid to stand in the storm with me. The hours seemed to crawl by, the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on me like a lead blanket. Sam stayed by my side, quietly offering support in the way only a true friend can. We didn't speak much, but his presence was enough to keep me from spiraling into a darker place. As evening descended, the reality of what I needed to do loomed over me. My kids, my beautiful children, were still blissfully unaware of how their lives were about to be upended. Cindy, my oldest at 12, was smart and perceptive. She had Lisa's bright blue eyes but a fire in her spirit that reminded me of myself. And Joey, only 8, still lived in that magical world where parents are invincible and love is simple. They deserved the truth, but how could I possibly explain this? How could I look into their innocent eyes and tell them that the family they knew and loved had just shattered into a million unrecognizable pieces? I stood up, my legs feeling like lead, and turned to Sam. The kids will be home soon, I said, my voice raw. I have to tell them, but I don't know if I can do it alone. Sam's eyes were filled with compassion, and he nodded. Of course. Whatever you need, man. The sound of the front door opening made my stomach twist into knots. Cindy and Joey burst into the room, their laughter filling the air, a sound that normally lifted my spirits. Today, it only made the pain sharper, knowing I was about to crush that joy. Dad, Joey exclaimed, running up to me and throwing his arms around my waist. His hug was warm, unguarded, full of love that I desperately wanted to protect. Cindy followed behind, her gaze curious as she noticed the heaviness in the room. Hey, Dad, she said, her voice cautious. Is everything okay? I knelt down, meeting Joey's wide eyes before glancing up at Cindy. The words were trapped in my throat, tangled and painful. How could I do this? How could I take away their sense of safety and love? I swallowed hard and tried to steady my voice. Come sit with me, I said, gesturing to the couch. Cindy frowned, sensing something was very wrong, but she obeyed, pulling Joey along with her. Sam took a step back, giving us some space but staying close, a silent guardian. My hands shook as I reached for theirs, one small and childlike, the other already growing into the strength of a young woman. I have to tell you something really hard, I began, my voice cracking. Something that's going to hurt, and I'm so sorry for that. Cindy's grip tightened on mine. What is it, Dad? She whispered, her eyes wide with fear. I took a deep breath, feeling my heart shatter all over again. Your mom. She's made some mistakes, I said slowly, choosing my words carefully. She's been keeping a big secret from us, and it's going to change things between us as a family. Joey's face scrunched up in confusion. What kind of secret? He asked, his voice small and uncertain. I looked at Cindy, whose expression was growing more anxious by the second. Your mom and I love you both very much, I said, my voice thick with emotion. But right now, we need some time to figure things out. We're still a family, but things are going to be different for a while. Tears welled up in Cindy's eyes, and she pulled Joey close, protective and strong despite her own fear. Is Mom okay? She asked, her voice cracking. She's okay, I assured them, though it felt like a lie. Nothing was okay. Nothing would ever be the same. But we need to work through some things, and I promise I'll be here for you every step of the way. Joey started to cry, clinging to Cindy, who held him fiercely. The sight of my children in pain, even though they didn't know the whole truth, was almost too much to bear. It felt like my failure, my broken world crashing down onto their small shoulders. Cindy wiped her tears angrily, trying to be brave. We'll get through it, she said, echoing words I had once told her when she was scared. It hurt even more to see my own resilience reflected in her eyes. I nodded, unable to speak, and pulled them both into my arms. We sat there in a tangled, tearful embrace, holding each other like a lifeline in a storm that none of us had seen coming. Holding my kids in that moment, I tried to etch every detail into my heart. The warmth of their little bodies, the way they clung to me like I was the only thing keeping their world from falling apart, the quiet strength Cindy showed despite her own fear. It was painful and beautiful and heartbreaking all at once. I knew that, no matter what, I had to find a way to protect them from the worst of this. Eventually, Joey's sobs quieted, and Cindy's tears slowed. The silence that followed felt heavy, like we were all too drained to speak. Sam had retreated into the kitchen, giving us some privacy, but I could feel his presence like a steadying anchor. "Can we see Mom?" Cindy finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Lisa wasn't just my wife. She was their mother. No matter how much she had betrayed me, I couldn't erase that bond, couldn't take away the love they had for her. I forced myself to keep my voice steady. "Not right now," I said gently. "She needs some time, and so do we. But I promise you'll see her soon." Joey pulled back, his face scrunched up in confusion. "Why can't we be together?" he asked, his innocence slicing through me like a knife. "We're a family." Tears threatened to spill over again, but I held them back. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes," I explained, my voice cracking. "Big mistakes that hurt other people. But that doesn't mean we don't love each other. It just means we need to figure out how to make things right." Joey didn't seem to understand, but Cindy nodded, her eyes dark with worry. She was growing up too fast, forced to grasp things no 12-year-old should have to deal with. I wished I could shield her from the harsh reality, but there was no way to undo the damage. The door creaked as Sam stepped back into the room, his eyes full of quiet sympathy. "How about we get some ice cream?" he suggested, trying to lift the heavy mood. "We can eat as much as we want. No rules tonight." Joey's eyes lit up, the promise of ice cream momentarily distracting him from his sadness. Cindy gave me a questioning look, like she needed my permission to be okay, even if just for a moment. I managed a small smile, grateful for Sam's attempt to ease the tension. "Go ahead," I said, ruffling Joey's hair. "You guys deserve a treat." They ran off with Sam, and I stayed back for a moment, sinking into the empty silence. It felt surreal, like I was standing in the ruins of a life I'd spent years building. How had it come to this? I was a father, a husband, a man who had always tried to do right by his family. Yet here I was, standing in the wreckage, trying to pick up the pieces. I took a shaky breath, running a hand over my face. The anger was still there, simmering just below the surface, but it was tangled with grief, exhaustion, and a profound sense of loss. I had loved Lisa. Hell, I still loved her, and that was the most infuriating part. Love and hate coiled together, twisting and tearing me apart from the inside. As I stood there, I heard the faint sound of Cindy and Joey's laughter from the kitchen, mingling with Sam's deep, comforting voice. It was a small reminder that, despite everything, there was still light. There was still something worth fighting for, even if it felt like I'd never recover from this betrayal. I squared my shoulders, bracing myself. The fight wasn't over. I had to be strong, not just for myself, but for them. My kids needed a father who could stand tall, even when his heart was shattered. With a deep breath, I headed to the kitchen, ready to face the next moment, one small step at a time. Walking into the kitchen, I found Sam spooning generous scoops of chocolate and vanilla ice cream into bowls while Joey and Cindy hovered nearby, their eyes glued to the treat being prepared. Despite everything, a small smile tugged at my lips. Sam had always had a way of lightening the mood, even when the world felt unbearably dark. Joey's face lit up when he saw me, and he practically bounced on his toes. "Dad, Sam said we can have extra sprinkles tonight," he announced, his voice full of that untainted, youthful excitement that made my chest ache. "Is that so?" I asked, raising an eyebrow at Sam, who just shrugged with a sheepish grin. "Figured it was a night for breaking some rules," Sam said. His tone was light, but I could see the seriousness lurking behind his eyes. He knew that every bit of joy we could give the kids right now was crucial. I nodded, grateful for his support. Sounds good to me, I agreed, leaning against the counter. I tried to soak in this small moment of normalcy, even as the storm of emotions continued to rage inside me. Joey dug into his ice cream, his worries forgotten for now, while Cindy took a more measured approach, still watching me with that guarded, mature expression that hurt more than I wanted to admit. I slid into a chair next to her. "How's the ice cream?" I asked, my voice gentle. She hesitated before taking a small bite. "It's good," she said quietly, but I could tell she was holding back a flood of questions and fears, things she wasn't ready to voice yet. I put a hand on her shoulder, hoping she could feel the love and reassurance I was struggling to convey in words. Sam tried to keep the mood light, telling a story about a mishap at the shop involving a broken lift and an oil spill that turned into an accidental slapstick comedy routine. Joey laughed, the sound genuine and bright, and even Cindy cracked a small smile. I joined in, chuckling despite myself. For a moment, just a moment, the weight lifted. But then my phone buzzed, breaking the fragile peace. My heart lurched as I glanced at the screen. It was a text from Lisa. "I'm at my sister's house. Please let me know when I can talk to the kids. I love them." The pain came rushing back, raw and jagged. I clenched my jaw, trying not to let my frustration show. It was as if the universe refused to let me escape, even for a few precious minutes. Cindy noticed my change in expression, her eyes narrowing. "Is that Mom?" she asked, her voice tight. I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah," I said, my voice strained. "She's staying with your aunt for a while." A shadow passed over her face, but she didn't say anything. Instead, she pushed her ice cream away, her appetite suddenly gone. Joey didn't notice, too busy shoving another spoonful into his mouth. I wished I could say something to make it better, to fix the cracks that had formed in my daughter's heart. But I knew words wouldn't be enough. All I could do was be here, steady and unyielding, while she processed the betrayal in her own way. Sam caught my eye, a silent question in his gaze. "You okay?" I gave him a barely perceptible nod, though we both knew it was a lie. The evening wore on, and I tried to be present, to hold on to whatever small sense of normalcy I could offer my kids. We played a board game, even though I struggled to focus. I read Joey a bedtime story, his head heavy against my chest as he slowly drifted off. Cindy lingered longer, curling up on the couch and pretending to read while stealing glances at me. Her presence was a comfort, but it also reminded me of everything I was on the verge of losing. When both kids were finally asleep, Sam stayed behind, helping me clean up the remnants of our attempt at a normal night. We worked in silence, the air thick with unsaid things, until finally, he set down the dish he was drying and turned to face me. "Are you sure you're okay?" he asked, his voice low but serious. I sighed, leaning against the counter. "No," I admitted, my voice breaking, "but I have to be." Sam nodded, his expression a mixture of sympathy and respect. "You'll get through this," he said, his voice firm. "You're stronger than you think." I didn't feel strong. I felt broken and lost. But hearing it from him, I wanted to believe it. I needed to believe it. "Thanks, man," I whispered, and for the first time in hours, the tears came. Hot and uncontrollable, spilling down my face as I finally let myself feel the full weight of everything I'd been trying to hold back. Sam pulled me into another hug, and I let myself grieve, knowing that tomorrow I'd have to pull myself together again. The house was quiet, almost oppressively so. The kind of silence that seems to amplify the chaos in your mind rather than calm it. After Sam left, I wandered from room to room, unable to find peace. Every corner of this home felt like a monument to the life Lisa and I had built together. The family photos on the wall, the drawings Joey had taped to the fridge, Cindy's science fair trophies lined up on the mantel, all reminders of what I thought was a happy, stable family. But now, everything felt like a lie. The reality of Lisa's betrayal sat heavy in my chest, an immovable weight I couldn't shake. I ended up in the living room, collapsing onto the couch. My eyes stung from exhaustion and tears, but sleep was nowhere to be found. The clock on the wall seemed to mock me, each tick a reminder of how long I had been stuck in this nightmare. I picked up my phone, staring at Lisa's message. I love them. Those words twisted in my gut. Did she think that love was enough to erase what she had done? To erase the trust she had shattered, the pain she had inflicted on all of us? A surge of anger hit me, hot and consuming. How dare she claim to love them while making choices that could destroy our family? But then, just as quickly, the anger gave way to a deep, crushing sadness. Love and betrayal. They were two sides of the same coin, and I was trapped in the spin, not knowing which side would land up. I dropped the phone onto the coffee table, the sound echoing in the quiet room. My head fell into my hands, and I pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to keep the tears from falling again. But they came anyway, a silent, relentless stream that left me feeling empty. I was so lost in the turmoil that I almost didn't hear the soft footsteps padding down the hall. Cindy appeared in the doorway, her face pale and her eyes wide with worry. She was clutching her favorite stuffed bear, something she hadn't done since she was little, and the sight of her holding it nearly broke me all over again. "Dad," she whispered, "why are you still up?" I sat up quickly, wiping my face. I couldn't let her see me like this. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile that felt all wrong. "Just thinking about stuff." Her eyes searched mine, too wise for her age. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, coming over to sit beside me. She tucked her legs up under her and looked at me with an expression that mirrored my own heartache. "Is it because of Mom?" Her question cut through me, raw and direct. I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "Yeah," I said softly. "It's been a tough day, hasn't it?" Cindy nodded, hugging her bear tighter. "I heard you crying," she confessed, her voice trembling. I didn't know what to do. My heart shattered all over again, and I pulled her into my arms, holding her tight. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, honey." We stayed like that for a long time, wrapped up in each other, sharing the pain that Lisa's choices had caused. I hated that Cindy had to be strong, that she had to carry any of this burden at all. She was just a kid, but life was forcing her to grow up too fast. Eventually, she pulled back, her eyes red but determined. "Are we going to be okay?" she asked, her voice small but steady. I wanted to give her an answer she could believe in, something that would chase away the fear in her eyes. "Yes," I said, even though I wasn't sure. "We're going to get through this. Together." Cindy nodded, her trust in me both a comfort and a weight. I knew I couldn't let her down, no matter how broken I felt inside. "Okay," she said, as if she was making a promise to herself. I kissed the top of her head, my heart aching with love and protectiveness. "Why don't you try to sleep again?" I suggested gently. "I'll be here if you need me." She hesitated but finally got up, her stuffed bear still clutched in her arms. "Good night, Dad," she whispered. "Good night, sweetheart," I replied, watching as she disappeared back down the hall. The house felt just a little less empty, a little less dark. But once she was gone, the weight of everything came crashing back down. I leaned back into the couch, staring up at the ceiling. Sleep would be hard to find, but I knew I couldn't break. Not with two kids depending on me to hold it all together. Morning came far too quickly, the night passing in a haze of restless thoughts and broken sleep. The first rays of dawn filtered through the blinds, painting the living room in a pale, cold light. My body ached from the stiffness of the couch, but the emotional exhaustion was worse. Still, I had to get up. The kids needed me. The sound of small footsteps broke the morning silence. Joey appeared, rubbing his eyes, his hair sticking up in all directions. "Dad," he mumbled, yawning, "why are you sleeping in here?" I forced a smile, doing my best to sound normal. "Just fell asleep watching TV," I lied, knowing he didn't need the burden of more worry. "Come here, buddy." He climbed up beside me, and I wrapped an arm around his tiny shoulders, holding him close. For a moment, I let myself be comforted by his innocence, by the way he still believed that his dad could fix anything. The weight of what he didn't know was suffocating, but I swallowed it down, knowing today would bring new challenges. "Is Mom making breakfast?" he asked, his question innocent but loaded with pain I wasn't ready to deal with. I hesitated, my mind racing for an answer. Mom's not here right now, I said softly, but I can make you something. How about pancakes? His face lit up, and I was grateful for the small distraction. Yeah, with chocolate chips? He asked, his eyes brightening with a hope that twisted my heart. Of course, I replied, ruffling his hair. Go get the syrup, and I'll meet you in the kitchen. He bounded away, and I dragged myself to my feet, every movement feeling heavy. I had barely made it into the kitchen when Cindy appeared, her expression guarded and weary. Her eyes met mine, and I saw the question she wasn't asking. What happens now? Morning, I said, trying to inject some cheer into my voice. Pancakes? She managed a small nod, but didn't look convinced. As I started mixing the batter, the silence between us felt thick, weighted with everything we both wanted to say but couldn't. Joey's chatter about syrup and toppings filled the room, a fragile mask over the hurt lurking beneath the surface. Can I help? Cindy asked quietly, her voice so different from her usual confident tone. I glanced at her, surprised. Of course, I said, handing her the bowl. She took it and began stirring, her movements slow and deliberate. We worked side by side, a semblance of normalcy that felt more fragile than ever. Joey kept chattering, oblivious, and I held on to that small piece of innocence as tightly as I could. Halfway through flipping pancakes, my phone buzzed again, vibrating across the counter. I picked it up and felt my stomach drop. Another message from Lisa. Can I come by to talk to the kids today? Please. My grip tightened on the phone, and I had to fight the urge to throw it across the room. How dare she ask to see them so soon, after everything she'd done? But I knew I couldn't keep her away forever. They were her children too, and no matter how much I despised her right now, they deserved answers. Dad? Cindy's voice pulled me back, and I realized I'd gone still, the pancake on the spatula starting to burn. Is everything okay? I quickly flipped the pancake, my movements jerky. Yeah, I lied again. Just distracted. She didn't believe me, and I could see it in the way her eyes narrowed, her worry deepening. But she didn't press, and for that, I was both relieved and heartbroken. My little girl was trying so hard to be strong, to be the adult in a situation where she shouldn't have to be. I put down the phone, feeling the anger and frustration simmer beneath the surface. I had to face Lisa eventually, but the thought of it made my stomach churn. The betrayal was still too raw, too fresh, and the last thing I wanted was to let her back into our world. But for now, I plastered a smile onto my face and finished making breakfast. I had to be strong, had to give my kids whatever sense of stability I could, even if it felt like the entire world was crumbling around us. Okay, pancakes are ready, I announced, trying to sound enthusiastic. Dig in. Joey cheered, and even Cindy managed a small smile. As we sat around the table, eating pancakes that tasted like sawdust to me, I silently prepared myself for the inevitable. Lisa would be back, and when she was, everything would be dragged into the light, whether we were ready or not. After breakfast, I went through the motions, cleaning up the dishes while Joey played in the living room and Cindy disappeared into her room. The house felt hollow, a far cry from the home it had once been. Every clink of a plate, every step on the hardwood floor seemed to echo, reverberating with memories of a happier time that now felt distant and unreachable. The text from Lisa still lingered in my mind, each word a thorn pressing into my consciousness. I couldn't ignore her, not if I wanted to do right by my kids. But facing her, seeing the woman I had once loved and trusted more than anyone, now wearing the mask of betrayal, it felt like more than I could handle. I stood at the kitchen sink, gripping the counter, breathing in and out, trying to keep my emotions in check. A part of me wondered if I would ever feel normal again, if the rawness of this wound would ever fade, or if it would forever be an ache beneath the surface. A gentle knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I glanced up, a surge of hope and fear coursing through me. Was it Lisa? No, she wouldn't come unannounced, not after everything. Still, the thought made my heart race. Opening the door, I found my neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, standing there with a casserole dish in her hands. She was a kind, older woman who lived down the street and had always been fond of our family, often bringing over baked goods or vegetables from her garden. "Good morning," she said, her smile warm but tinged with concern. "I thought you could use a little something extra today." She held out the dish, and I took it, the weight of her kindness making my throat tighten. "Thank you," I managed, my voice strained. "You didn't have to do that." "Nonsense," she replied, her gaze soft but knowing. "I know when a family needs a bit of support." She paused, as if debating whether to say more. "If you ever need someone to talk to, you know where to find me." I nodded, grateful but unsure how to respond. The entire neighborhood probably knew something was wrong by now, even if they didn't know the specifics. Secrets didn't stay hidden long in a small community. "I appreciate it," I said finally, offering a small smile. After she left, I placed the casserole in the fridge, the simple act of neighborly love grounding me for a moment. But the reprieve was short-lived. The heaviness returned, the inescapable reality pressing down on me. Cindy reappeared in the kitchen, her face set with that same mixture of worry and determination. "Are you going to let Mom come over?" she asked, her voice breaking through the silence. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "She wants to," I admitted, the words tasting bitter. "But I don't know, Cindy. I'm not ready, and I don't know if you or Joey are either." Her brow furrowed, and she bit her lip. "I want to see her," she said quietly, though I could tell it pained her to say it. "I don't want to, but I need to know why." My heart clenched at the sadness in her voice. My little girl, forced to grapple with emotions that no child should have to face. "Okay," I said, my voice steadying. "I'll let her come by later, but only if you're sure you're ready." Cindy nodded, her resolve clear. "I'm sure," she said, even though the hurt in her eyes betrayed her. I sighed, feeling the exhaustion seep into my bones. "All right, we'll do this together." Later that afternoon, as the clock ticked closer to the time Lisa would arrive, I sat with Cindy and Joey in the living room. Joey was coloring, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing. Cindy sat beside me, her hand resting in mine, her grip tighter than usual. When the doorbell rang, it felt like a gunshot, shattering the quiet. I took a deep breath, my heart racing, and stood up. This was it, the moment I'd been dreading. I had to face her, for the kid's sake, even if it broke me all over again. I opened the door, and there she was. Lisa, the woman I had once loved with every fiber of my being. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her purse. "Hi," she said, her voice small and fragile. I didn't respond, just stepped aside to let her in. My jaw was clenched so tight it hurt, but I had to keep it together. For Cindy, for Joey, for whatever shreds of family we had left. Lisa stepped inside, her gaze landing on the kids. Joey looked up from his coloring, confused but happy to see her. Cindy, on the other hand, watched her mother with eyes full of questions, pain, and anger that made my heart break all over again. Lisa knelt down, tears streaming down her face. "Hey, my loves," she whispered. The room was filled with tension, a silence that felt like it might snap at any moment. We were all waiting for the dam to break. Lisa's voice trembled as she spoke, each word laced with guilt and longing. "Hey, my loves," she repeated, her gaze fixed on Joey and Cindy, her eyes glistening with tears she probably hoped would soften the blows of what she had done. But Cindy didn't move. She sat there on the couch, her face a mask of conflicting emotions, anger, hurt, confusion, all fighting for dominance. Joey, on the other hand, ran to his mother without hesitation, his arms wrapping around her neck. "Mom!" he exclaimed, burying his face in her shoulder. He didn't understand. He was too young, too innocent to grasp the complexity of betrayal and the way it tears at the seams of a family. Lisa held him close, her tears spilling over as she clung to him, as if his embrace could somehow cleanse the pain and mistakes. "I missed you so much," she whispered, her voice cracking. I watched from the doorway, my hands balled into fists at my sides. Part of me wanted to pull Joey away, to keep him from the mess that she had created, but I knew I couldn't. He deserved his mother, no matter how broken our lives had become. Cindy stayed put, her eyes narrowing at the display before her. She wasn't the same as Joey. She was old enough to feel the full weight of what was happening, and her pain was sharp and unforgiving. After a moment, Lisa gently set Joey down and turned her attention to Cindy. "Sweetheart," Lisa said, her voice thick with emotion. She stepped toward her daughter, but Cindy flinched, her body recoiling as if Lisa's love could burn her. The distance between them was a chasm, a void that no amount of tears could bridge. "Don't," Cindy said, her voice low and cold. "Don't act like everything's fine. It's not." Her words hung in the air, a blunt and painful truth that cut deeper than any wound. Lisa's face crumpled, and she reached out as if to touch Cindy's hand, but Cindy pulled back, her eyes blazing. "You lied to us," she continued, her voice rising. "You lied to Dad. To me. How could you?" I stepped closer, my heart pounding. Watching Cindy confront her mother was both painful and awe-inspiring. My daughter was strong, stronger than I'd ever given her credit for, and seeing her stand up for herself made me proud, even if it shattered me to see her so hurt. Lisa's shoulders slumped, and she sank down to her knees, looking up at Cindy with desperation. "I know," she whispered. "I know I hurt you all. I made terrible mistakes, and I can't take them back. But I love you. I never stopped loving you." Cindy's lip quivered, but she refused to let herself cry. "Then why?" she demanded, her voice breaking. "If you loved us so much, why did you do it?" The room was unbearably quiet, and I realized I was holding my breath, waiting for Lisa's answer, waiting to see if she could somehow explain the unexplainable, if she could make sense of a betrayal that had fractured our family. Lisa's tears flowed freely now, and she looked so small, so broken. "I don't have a good reason," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I was selfish. I was lost, and I let myself be tempted. But that doesn't change how much I love you." Cindy shook her head, her eyes hardening. "Love isn't enough," she said, her voice trembling. "You can't just say you love us and expect everything to be okay. You hurt Dad. You hurt all of us." The truth of her words hit me like a sledgehammer, and I felt my throat tighten. I wanted to intervene, to spare Cindy the pain of having to articulate what we were all feeling, but I knew she needed this. She needed to be heard. Lisa crumpled further, her hands clasped in front of her, begging for forgiveness. "I know," she whispered. "I know, and I'll do anything to make it right. Please, just give me a chance to fix this." Cindy's face contorted with a mix of grief and anger. "I don't know if you can," she said softly, her voice breaking. And then she turned to me, her eyes pleading. "Dad?" I stepped forward, finally breaking the silence I'd maintained since Lisa walked through the door. My jaw was clenched, my emotions a storm I could barely contain. "We're going to figure this out," I said, my voice steady but heavy. "But it's going to take time." Lisa looked up at me, her eyes full of desperation and regret. "Please," she whispered. "I'll do whatever it takes." I met her gaze, my heart hard and unyielding. "Right now, you need to focus on the kids," I said. "That's all that matters. We can't pretend everything is okay, because it's not. But for them, we'll find a way." The air was thick with unresolved emotions, but I knew this was only the beginning of a long and painful road. Cindy and Joey needed stability, and I was determined to give it to them, even if it meant facing Lisa and the pain she had caused. Lisa's shoulders sagged under the weight of my words, her eyes shimmering with a mixture of regret and desperation. The love she professed now felt hollow, as if it was desperately clawing at the pieces of what she had broken. My instinct was to keep my guard up, to shield myself and the kids from further pain. But I also knew this was a moment that would shape everything going forward. Joey, sensing the tension but not fully understanding it, clung to his mother's arm, his innocent trust twisting a knife in my heart. He still saw her as the loving, dependable mom she had always been, and I envied his naivety. Cindy, however, was another story. She stood a few feet away, her arms crossed over her chest, her face a mask of pain and confusion. "Can we just be normal again?" Joey asked, his wide eyes looking between all of us. His voice was small, filled with a hope that none of us could deliver. His question was like a shot straight to the gut, and I swallowed hard, struggling to maintain my composure. I knelt down beside him, placing a hand on his small shoulder. "It's going to be different for a while, buddy," I said, trying to keep my voice gentle. "But we'll find a way to be okay. I promise." His lip trembled, and he looked up at Lisa, searching her face for comfort. She cupped his cheek, her tears spilling over. "I'm so sorry, Joey," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I didn't mean to hurt you or Cindy or Dad. I love you so much." Joey buried his face in her shoulder, and she held him tight, her sobs muffled in his hair. I watched, feeling a pang of jealousy and anger that she could still find solace in her children's love. But more than that, I felt a fierce protectiveness over them. I wouldn't let them be dragged through this pain any more than they already had. Cindy stood apart, her eyes fixed on the scene with an unreadable expression. Finally, she took a shaky breath. "I don't know if I believe you, Mom," she said, her voice cold and cutting. "But I want to believe you." Lisa turned toward her, her face contorting with heartbreak. "I'll prove it to you," she vowed, her voice strong even through the tears. "I'll do whatever it takes to earn back your trust." Cindy looked away, her jaw clenched. She was trying so hard to be strong, but I could see the cracks forming. My heart ached for her, for the way she was being forced to navigate emotions far too complicated for someone her age. I stepped forward, gently placing a hand on Cindy's shoulder. "You don't have to decide anything right now," I told her. "We're all figuring this out together." She glanced up at me, her eyes filled with unshed tears, and nodded. "Okay," she whispered, though her voice carried the weight of someone who had already lost too much. The silence stretched on, uncomfortable and heavy. Finally, I turned to Lisa, my expression hardening. "We need boundaries," I said, my voice steady. "If you're serious about fixing this, we'll have to set some ground rules. For now, you can see the kids, but you're not staying here." Lisa flinched, but she nodded, understanding. "I'll do whatever you need," she said, her voice cracking. "Just please, don't shut me out." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Part of me wanted to shut her out, to protect myself from more pain, but the other part knew I had to stay strong for the kids. They needed both of us, even if it felt like an impossible situation. Joey finally pulled back, his eyes red and puffy from crying. "Can we have family movie night?" he asked, his voice tentative. He was grasping for some semblance of normalcy, something to cling to in the chaos. I glanced at Cindy, who gave a small, reluctant nod. "Yeah," I said, my throat tightening. "We can do that." Lisa's face lit up with a fragile hope, but I couldn't look at her for long. The wound was too fresh, too raw. We moved to the living room, each step feeling heavy, and set up a movie like we'd done 1,000 times before. But nothing felt the same. The cracks were everywhere, visible and gaping, and I wondered if they would ever fully heal. As the movie started, I sat between Joey and Cindy, my arms wrapped around them. Lisa sat on the other side, a ghost of her former presence, and I kept my eyes forward, determined not to let her see how much she had broken me. The movie played, but none of us were really watching. Joey's laughter, usually so infectious and bright, sounded forced, and Cindy stayed stiff and silent beside me, her eyes never leaving the screen. Lisa sat on the far end of the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, as if she were afraid to move, afraid to disturb the fragile truce we'd managed to cobble together for Joey's sake. The air felt suffocating, thick with unresolved tension and emotions that none of us knew how to navigate. I couldn't focus on the film, my mind racing through the past and the future, haunted by the what-ifs and the damage we'd have to rebuild, or try to. My heart felt heavy, the kind of weight that made each breath painful. When the credits finally rolled, Joey looked up at me, hope flickering in his wide eyes. "Can we have popcorn, Dad?" he asked, his voice a tentative echo of normalcy. I managed a small smile, anything to make him feel safer, more secure. "Yeah, buddy," I said. "Why don't you get the bowl, and I'll make some?" He nodded and hopped off the couch, his footsteps light as he ran to the kitchen. Cindy stayed behind, her shoulders hunched and her gaze distant. She hadn't said much since Lisa arrived, and I knew the storm inside her was far from over. I rubbed her back gently, a silent reminder that I was there. Lisa took a shaky breath, breaking the silence between us. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "for letting me be here. I know I don't deserve it." I didn't look at her. I couldn't. "This isn't about you," I replied, my voice flat. "It's about them." She flinched, and for a moment, a part of me felt guilty. But then I remembered the pain she had caused, the lies, the betrayal, and the guilt disappeared. I had to be strong, not just for myself but for our kids. Any softness I had for Lisa had been buried under the weight of everything she had done. Joey came back, carrying the bowl with both hands, and I went to help him, grateful for the distraction. The popcorn popped, filling the kitchen with the familiar, buttery smell that reminded me of simpler times, when our biggest worry was what movie to watch and how late we could stay up. But things weren't simple anymore. They were fractured, fragile, and even this small moment felt like it could shatter at any second. We sat back down, Joey diving into the popcorn with both hands, giggling when he accidentally spilled some on the floor. Cindy managed a small smile at her brother's antics, but her eyes remained shadowed with sadness. Lisa watched them, her expression a mix of longing and regret, and I forced myself not to care. The evening stretched on, and I did my best to pretend, to give my kids something that felt like a normal family night. But beneath the surface, the cracks were there, deep and painful, and I wondered how long we could keep up the facade. When it was time for bed, I tucked Joey in, his small body snuggled under the covers. He looked up at me with sleepy, trusting eyes. "Will everything be okay, Dad?" he asked, his voice small and hopeful. My chest tightened, but I forced a smile. "Yeah, buddy," I said, brushing his hair back. "We're going to figure it out. I promise." He nodded, already half asleep, and I kissed his forehead before slipping out of his room. Cindy was next, sitting on her bed, her knees pulled up to her chest. She didn't say anything as I sat beside her, but she leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder. "Dad," she whispered, her voice breaking. I don't know if I can forgive her. The pain in her voice shattered me, but I wrapped my arm around her, holding her close. "You don't have to decide that right now," I told her, my own voice thick with emotion. "It's okay to be hurt. It's okay to be angry." She nodded, and a tear slipped down her cheek. I held her until she fell asleep, my heart aching for her and the innocence she had lost. When I finally stepped out of her room, I found Lisa standing in the hallway, her eyes red from crying. Our gazes met, and the distance between us felt insurmountable. There were so many things I wanted to say, so many accusations and questions and words that would only add to the pain. But I was too tired, too worn out to fight. Instead, I walked past her, leaving her standing there alone, the weight of our broken family hanging heavy in the air. The darkness outside felt heavy, pressing against the windows of the house as I made my way down the hallway, away from Lisa. Every step felt like walking through quicksand, the weight of the day dragging me down, making it hard to breathe. I reached the living room and collapsed onto the couch, rubbing my temples and trying to clear my mind. The memories wouldn't stop coming. Lisa's smile on our wedding day, the way we used to whisper about the future late at night, planning a life together that now seemed like a cruel joke. How had we ended up here, broken and barely holding on? I heard Lisa's footsteps as she slowly followed, her presence unwelcome yet unavoidable. She lingered in the doorway, as if waiting for permission to step closer. I didn't give it to her, didn't even look up. The silence stretched between us, an ocean filled with everything we hadn't said, everything we might never say. Finally, she took a step into the room. "We need to talk," she said, her voice quiet but firm. I didn't respond. I wasn't sure I had the energy to face another confrontation, not after everything that had happened today. But she pressed on, her words trembling with desperation. "Please, we have to talk about this." I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to look at her. The woman standing before me looked nothing like the one I had married. She seemed older, worn down by guilt and regret, her eyes pleading for something I wasn't sure I could give. Talk about what? I asked, my voice cold and brittle. About how you destroyed our family. About how you lied to me for a year. Lisa winced, but she didn't back down. I know, she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. I know I hurt you. I hurt all of you. But I'm trying to make it right. I want to make it right. A bitter laugh escaped me, and I shook my head. How? I asked. How can you possibly make this right, Lisa? You think saying sorry is going to fix what you did? You think it erases the lies, the nights I lay awake wondering why things felt so wrong? Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I felt no satisfaction, just exhaustion. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she said. Not yet. I know it'll take time, but I need you to know that I'm committed to fixing this, to being there for the kids, for you, in whatever way you'll let me. I stood up, the sudden movement making her step back, as if afraid I might lash out. The anger boiled beneath the surface, but more than that, there was sadness. A bone-deep, aching sadness. You don't get it, do you? I said, my voice shaking. This isn't just about me. It's about them. Cindy can barely look at you. Joey still thinks we're going to wake up tomorrow, and everything will be fine. You've torn us apart, Lisa, she sobbed, covering her mouth with her hand. I know, she whispered. God, I know. And I hate myself for it. But I still love you. I still love our family. Can't we at least try? The word try echoed in my mind, bouncing around like a cruel joke. Try. It sounded so small, so inadequate for the mountain of pain we were standing in front of. But as much as I wanted to say no, to shut her out and protect myself, I knew the kids deserved more than my anger. They deserved a chance, even if it was painful. I don't know how to do that, I admitted, my voice raw. I don't know how to try when every time I look at you, all I see is what you did. Lisa stepped forward, her hand hovering as if she wanted to touch me, but she let it fall back to her side. We'll figure it out, she said, her voice filled with a hope that made me want to scream. I'm not giving up on us. Even if you hate me right now, I won't give up. I turned away, my shoulders sagging. The fight in me was gone, replaced by a bone-deep fatigue that felt like it would never leave. For the kids' sake, I said finally, my voice hollow. We'll try. But don't expect me to forgive you. Not now. Maybe not ever. Lisa nodded, her tears still falling, but she seemed almost relieved, as if that tiny, reluctant agreement was enough to breathe life back into her. She wiped her face and took a shaky breath. Thank you, she whispered. I'll take whatever chance you give me. The silence returned, suffocating and heavy. I walked past her, heading to the front door. I needed air, needed to breathe without the walls closing in. Lisa didn't follow. She stayed where she was, alone in the living room, the shattered remnants of our marriage lying all around us. I stepped outside, the cold night air biting at my skin, and finally let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The road ahead was unclear, filled with pain and uncertainty, but one thing was sure. This was only the beginning. The night was silent and dark, the cold air cutting through the thin fabric of my shirt. I stood on the porch, breathing deeply, trying to calm the storm inside me. The street was empty, the neighborhood quiet, but the turmoil in my heart was deafening. My hands shook as I rubbed them together, not from the cold, but from the sheer emotional exhaustion. How did we end up here? The memories wouldn't leave me alone. The laughter of our children during weekend barbecues, the shared glances with Lisa over the dinner table, the quiet moments late at night when I thought we were unbreakable. It all felt so far away, like a dream that had curdled into a nightmare. The door behind me creaked open, and I turned, half expecting to see Lisa, but it was Cindy. She stepped out, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale and worried. Her eyes found mine, and she came over, standing next to me. I couldn't sleep, she admitted, her voice small. I pulled her into a hug, wrapping my arms around her as she leaned into me. I'm sorry, sweetheart, I whispered, my voice breaking. I wish I could make this better for you. She didn't cry. She just stood there, holding on, her strength both a comfort and a source of heartbreak. Why did this happen to us? She asked, the question hanging between us like a ghost. I didn't have an answer. Sometimes people make terrible choices, I said, my voice thick with emotion. And we're left to pick up the pieces. She pulled back to look at me, her eyes searching mine for some truth, some assurance that things would be okay. But I couldn't give her that. I couldn't lie to her, not when everything felt so fragile. Do you think Mom really wants to fix things? She asked, her voice cracking. The honesty in her question cut me to the core. Cindy was old enough to see the cracks, to know that love alone wasn't always enough. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I think she does, I said carefully, but wanting to fix something doesn't make it easy. It's going to be hard, really hard. Her gaze dropped and she nodded, hugging the blanket tighter around herself. I don't know if I can forgive her, she whispered, and her voice was so small, so full of pain, that I felt my own heart shatter all over again. You don't have to decide that now, I told her. Take your time. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to feel whatever you're feeling. She looked up at me, tears finally spilling over. I just want us to be a family again, she said, her voice breaking. I miss when everything was normal. I pulled her back into my arms, holding her as tightly as I could. I miss it too, I whispered, my own tears falling silently. More than you know. We stood there in the cold, clinging to each other, both of us mourning the family we had lost. Cindy's strength was incredible, but she was still a child, forced to carry a burden that no one her age should have to bear. And I, her father, felt powerless to protect her from this new reality. Finally, she pulled away, wiping her face. I'll try, she said softly, to give Mom a chance. But I don't know if I can really forgive her. That's okay, I assured her. You don't have to forgive her right away, or maybe ever. Just do what's best for you. She nodded, her eyes tired but determined. Thanks, Dad, she whispered, and with one last hug, she turned and went back inside, leaving me alone once more. I stayed on the porch for a while longer, staring out into the darkness. The road ahead felt long and impossible, full of unknowns and pain. But in that moment, holding my daughter, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't let my own brokenness ruin whatever chance we had to find some kind of peace. I exhaled slowly, watching my breath disappear into the cold night air. There was no map for what came next, no guide for how to heal a family shattered by betrayal. But I was determined to try. For Cindy, for Joey, and maybe even for myself. The dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in pale shades of pink and gold. It felt strange, almost cruel, that the world could look so peaceful when everything in my life was so fractured. I stayed on the porch until the first light of morning fully broke, then finally went back inside, my body aching from exhaustion. The house was still quiet. Joey and Cindy were still asleep, and for that, I was grateful. They deserved a few more hours of innocence before we all had to face reality again. I brewed a pot of coffee, the bitter aroma filling the kitchen and giving me a small sense of normalcy. How many mornings had I done this same thing, never realizing how fragile that routine really was? As I stood there, cradling the mug in my hands, I heard soft footsteps behind me. I turned to find Lisa standing in the doorway, looking as worn and broken as I felt. Her hair was disheveled, and she had dark circles under her eyes, a testament to her own sleepless night. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the weight of everything hanging between us. I didn't sleep, she said quietly, her voice raw. I kept thinking about everything I've done, about how much I've hurt all of you. I took a long sip of my coffee, the warmth doing little to ease the coldness I felt inside. Regret doesn't change anything, I said, my voice harsher than I intended. It doesn't fix the damage. She winced, but she didn't argue. Instead, she stepped into the kitchen, wrapping her arms around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. I know, she whispered, but I still have to try. I set my mug down, the sound loud in the quiet kitchen. What do you want, Lisa? I asked, the exhaustion in my voice echoing through the room. What are you hoping for? Because I'm barely holding on here. Her eyes filled with tears, and she bit her lip, struggling to keep her emotions in check. I want to rebuild our family, she said. I want to earn back your trust, even if it takes the rest of my life. I know I've ruined everything, but I can't give up on us. Anger flared, hot and sudden. You gave up on us the moment you chose someone else, I snapped. You didn't think about us then. You didn't think about the kids. Her tears spilled over, and she pressed her hands to her face, sobbing quietly. The sight of her pain did little to ease my own. If anything, it made me angrier, more bitter. But beneath that anger, there was still something else, a tiny flicker of love, or at least the ghost of it. It made me hate myself almost as much as I hated her betrayal. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to find a sliver of calm. The kids come first, I said finally, my voice shaking. Their needs, their happiness, that's what matters now. If you want to be part of their lives, then you'll have to show them that you're worthy of that. Lisa lowered her hands, her face streaked with tears. I will, she promised, her voice trembling. I'll do whatever it takes. I turned away, not ready to see the hope in her eyes. We'll see, I said, my words flat and uncommitted. The road to forgiveness was long, and I wasn't even sure I wanted to walk it. The sound of small feet on the stairs saved us from more painful conversation. Joey came down, rubbing his eyes and yawning. He froze when he saw us both in the kitchen, his gaze bouncing between us. Morning, buddy, I said, forcing a smile that felt unnatural. Want some breakfast? He nodded, and Lisa stepped forward, her voice gentle. I can make pancakes, she offered, but Joey hesitated, looking to me for guidance. The trust and uncertainty in his eyes made my heart ache. I swallowed hard and nodded. Sure, I said, keeping my voice calm. Pancakes sound good. Lisa moved to the stove, and I watched her, my mind torn between wanting to push her away forever and holding on to the hope that, somehow, things could be okay again. But for now, I focused on Joey, on giving him a morning that felt normal, even if it was just a facade. As Lisa flipped pancakes, the ordinary sounds of a morning routine filled the air, and for a moment, it almost felt like nothing had changed. But I knew better. The cracks were still there, deep and wide, and it would take more than pancakes and promises to even begin to heal them. The kitchen felt trapped in an odd limbo of past and present. Lisa moved through the motions of making pancakes, her hands familiar with every step, but the weight of her presence was different now. She wasn't the same woman who had made Saturday morning pancakes for years, and I wasn't the same man who had loved her unconditionally. Everything between us was a broken version of what it used to be, yet here we were, playing house for the sake of the kids. Joey seemed oblivious, or maybe he was choosing to be. He chattered about school and his favorite cartoons, his innocence both comforting and painful. I couldn't help but wonder how long we could shield him from the truth, how long this illusion could last before reality set in. Cindy came downstairs a few minutes later, her expression guarded as she took in the scene. Her eyes narrowed slightly when she saw Lisa at the stove, and I braced myself for whatever she might say. But she didn't speak. Instead, she sat down beside me, her silence louder than any words. Morning, sweetheart, Lisa tried, her voice soft and hopeful. Cindy didn't respond, her gaze fixed on the table. I wanted to reach out to her, to tell her it was okay to be angry, to be hurt, but I didn't know how to make it better. I was still grappling with my own pain, and the weight of being strong for both of them felt suffocating. Lisa brought the pancakes to the table, setting the plate down in the center. Here you go, she said, her smile shaky. Joey dove in, piling his plate high and drenching his pancakes in syrup. Cindy, however, just picked at her food, her fork barely moving. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness grounding me. You don't have to eat if you're not hungry, I told Cindy, my voice gentle. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with questions I couldn't answer. But she nodded, pushing her plate away and leaning back in her chair. Lisa's shoulders slumped, but she didn't push Cindy to speak. She knew better than to try. Instead, she focused on Joey, asking him about his day and school projects, trying desperately to hold on to something normal. Joey answered, his voice cheerful, but even he seemed to sense the tension, his eyes darting between me and Cindy. I wanted to hate Lisa for what she had done, for the way she had shattered our family. But watching her try so hard, watching the pain etched into her face, I realized how complicated everything had become. Love and betrayal were intertwined, and it was impossible to separate one from the other. I hated what she had done, but I still felt the echo of what we used to be. The meal ended in a quiet that was both peaceful and strained. Joey ran off to play, leaving me, Lisa, and Cindy in the uncomfortable silence of the kitchen. Lisa fidgeted with her hands, clearly searching for the right words. "I was thinking," she began, her voice tentative, "maybe we could all go for a walk later? Just to get out of the house, be together." Cindy stiffened, and I saw the flash of anger in her eyes. "No," she said, her voice hard. "I don't want to pretend like everything's okay." Lisa flinched, but she didn't argue. Instead, she nodded, her shoulders drooping. "I understand," she whispered. Cindy looked at me, her eyes begging for some kind of validation, and I placed a hand on her arm. "It's okay to feel that way," I told her. "We're not going to pretend. We'll take things one step at a time." Lisa swallowed, her eyes filling with tears again, but she kept them in check. She stood up, her movements stiff and unsure. "I should probably go," she said, her voice cracking. "Give you all some space." The relief on Cindy's face was palpable, but it hurt to see it. This was her mother, and she shouldn't have to feel this way. But she did, and there was nothing I could do to change that. Lisa gathered her things, and as she turned to leave, she paused in the doorway, looking back at me. "Thank you for letting me be here," she said, her voice so full of longing that it made my heart ache. "I'll keep trying." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just watched as she walked out, the door closing softly behind her. The silence that followed felt heavier than before, but there was a small sense of relief as well. Cindy let out a breath she'd been holding, and I pulled her into a hug, feeling her tension slowly melt away. "It's going to be okay," I whispered, even though I wasn't sure I believed it. But I had to say it, for her and for myself. We would keep trying to piece together this broken life, one small step at a time. The moment Lisa closed the door behind her, the entire house seemed to exhale, releasing a breath none of us knew we had been holding. Cindy sank into her chair, her shoulders slumping, the mask of stoic anger slipping to reveal the pain and exhaustion beneath. I watched her, feeling a familiar wave of helplessness. My little girl was hurting, and no amount of words could erase what she'd been forced to endure. I sat down beside her, the kitchen feeling far too empty without Joey's laughter or the clattering sounds of a family meal in full swing. It was too quiet, too heavy, but we sat there together, sharing the silence. "Dad," Cindy said softly, breaking the quiet. Her voice was raw, but her eyes met mine, searching for something I hoped I could give her. "Will things ever feel normal again?" Her question was simple, but it hit me like a freight train. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and reached out to take her hand. "Normal might look different from now on," I admitted, squeezing her fingers gently. "But we'll find a new normal. It won't be easy, and it'll take time, but we'll get there." Cindy's eyes filled with tears, and she quickly wiped them away, as if refusing to let herself be vulnerable. But she didn't pull her hand away from mine. Instead, she leaned into me, resting her head against my shoulder, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I was doing something right. We sat like that for a while, the kitchen slowly warming with the light of the morning sun. Joey eventually wandered back in, his toy dinosaur clutched in one hand and a hopeful smile on his face. "Can we play outside?" he asked, his voice bright and full of energy that felt almost alien in the gloom of the morning. Cindy pulled back, giving me a small, weary smile. "Go ahead," I said, grateful for the chance to give them both a break from the heaviness that had settled over our lives. "I'll join you in a bit." Joey grabbed Cindy's hand, pulling her to her feet, and she let him lead her outside. I watched them through the window, my heart aching but hopeful as they chased each other around the yard. For a moment, they looked like normal kids, free from the burden of adult pain and broken promises. I stayed behind, my mind still swirling with everything that had happened. The weight of Lisa's betrayal and the uncertainty of our future pressed down on me, but there was a new determination mixed in with the hurt. We had survived the worst of the storm, and now it was time to rebuild, even if the pieces didn't fit together perfectly anymore. The door creaked open again, and Sam appeared, his expression cautious but warm. "Hey," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "Thought I'd stop by, see if you need anything." I let out a heavy sigh, a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "Honestly, I don't know what I need," I admitted, running a hand through my hair. "But I'm glad you're here." He nodded, stepping inside and giving me a knowing look. "It's going to be a long road," he said, his voice steady. "But you're not doing this alone. We've got your back." The gratitude I felt was overwhelming, and I managed a small, genuine smile. "Thanks, man," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I really mean that." Together, we walked outside, where the kids were laughing and playing, their joy a reminder that life could still be beautiful, even in the midst of pain. I stood there, the morning sun warming my face, and took a deep breath. We weren't fixed. We weren't whole. But we were still here, still standing. And that was something worth holding on to. The journey toward healing had only just begun, and I had no idea what the future held. But I knew one thing. I would keep fighting for my kids, for myself, and for whatever semblance of peace we could find, one step at a time. Thank you for following this story. If it resonated with you, or if you've experienced something similar, feel free to share your thoughts or stories below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more narratives like this one.